Hey guys, it's BlazeCraft back with more Genshin Impact. Today I'm gonna talk about the EM buff and its impact on Venti. And as a teaser, you can see how Venti on 4-star EM artifacts outperforming 5-star artifacts for a crit build. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get into it. First, I want to get a few things out of the way quickly. With the buff on Elemental Mastery, Diminishing Returns is practically not a concern for Elemental Mastery anymore. Secondly, Skyward Harp is almost always, I'm talking about 99% of the situations here, outperformed by both Stringless and Windbloom Oath, with Stringless being the best performer. Third, I want to talk about the truth regarding EM artifact opportunity cost. The EM artifact distribution is rarer, but EM 4-star artifacts are viable because the initial ceiling is so high, plus EM artifacts don't care about substats as much as crit builds. It means that while you encounter crit artifacts more often, you also have to discard them a lot more because the substats are important. For EM artifacts, as long as you get the right main stat, you will already get 99% of what the artifact will give you in terms of damage. The other reason why 4-star artifacts is viable is because crit builds need the extra roll for both the stats and roll, but EM builds only get very minimum improvements from attack and crit, so the most useful stat is energy recharge, and it's easy to get enough energy recharge from just 4-star artifacts, which, by the way, energy recharge is also a stat that crit builds need. So to sum it up, EM build has a very high floor but with very minimum room for improvement. Crit build has a very low floor plus biggest room for improvement, but it's difficult for crit to outperform EM. Next, I want to discuss the probability of getting your desired substats. For crit build, the probability of you getting your crit rolls looks like this. So if you do get 2 crit 4 roll artifacts, it's probably still within the realm of reason to aim for 4 crit rolls. This is also excluding the fact that you also need to get enough energy recharge rolls, usually with a minimum of 3 rolls overall. For EM build, this is what the probability is like when you're only chasing after 1 substat on the flower and feather. The probability is the same for when you're only after energy recharge on your Sands, Goblet and Circlet. The next best stat is any form of attack, but honestly, the substats don't matter too much. If you're able to get attack or crit, just think of them as tiny bonuses. Anyway, it is from these 2 charts that I derive a rough approximation that for every EM roll, the chance is about the same as getting 2.5 crit rolls. Anyway guys, next is the most fun part of the video, the maths. So I'll show you guys a few comparisons. First of all, I like to compare average roll performances. Average roll here refers to 10 crit rolls or 4 EM rolls. This is what it looks like when you compare 5-star crit build against 4-star EM build. First of all, I highlighted them using different colors, so it's red for crit and it's green for EM. Because we are only taking into account 10 crit rolls, we only end up at around 50 to 77 when we're using the Stringless. So then use Skyward Harp, the crit weapon, I hear you say, but as you'll see later on, Skyward Harp actually performs worse even in a crit setting. Anyway, the other division I'm making is with or without Bennett buff. The ones on top are without, the ones below have the buff. But as you'll see, a full EM build on 4-star EM artifacts actually outperforms the 5-star artifacts with or without Bennett. Next, we are comparing great roll performances. Great roll refers to 20 crit rolls versus 8 EM rolls. First, let's take a look at how the 5-star crit build performs against 4-star EM artifact. As you'll see here, even when you use Skyward Harp on a higher investment, getting close to 7550, Skyward Harp still performs worse than the Stringless on a crit build. And even then, a full EM build using 4-star artifacts still outperforms the 5-star artifacts on a crit build. But okay, let's take a look at what happens when Bennett is included in the picture. There is a massive return because a higher attack will yield a lot more when multiplied further. So there is a massive spike from 94k to 132k, so almost 40k difference. But the fact is, Stringless is still ahead of Skyward Harp even with Bennett here, and amazingly, Stringless on full 4-star EM artifacts is still ahead. But yeah, the numbers are very close, so it's practically head to head. So in this situation, there's really no incentive in changing your build to EM, even though bear in mind that this is still against 4-star EM artifacts. When I use 5-star EM artifacts, full EM is ahead by 10k damage, which understandably due to its rarity, unless you just happen to come across some random EM artifacts, for just an extra 10k is very likely not worth the resin cost. But the point is that even at higher investment levels, the crit build is still playing the catch-up game. And just to give you guys a perspective into what a 20 crit roll is, that is actually assuming that you get 4 crit roll per artifact, including the goblet and circlet. The probability of you getting 4 crit rolls is around 18% per artifact when you roll at least 2 crits in a 4 substat artifact. The probability is down to just 1.5% for the circlet slot. And then the funny thing is, even at that level without Bennett, you still can't even outdamage the full 4-star EM build on average rolls. I hope that this is enough to give you guys on some perspective on how hard it is for crit to catch up against the full EM build. People usually ask if crit will ever outdamage EM. The answer is yes, but for you to be able to reach that kind of crit value, the probability is practically 0%. First of all, we're talking about 30 crit rolls, meaning that if you have artifacts like that, the probability in which is 3% per artifact, except the circlet, which is 0.1%, and you have to have it across all 5 slots, then yes, your crit Venti will do more damage. And don't forget that you need to have enough ER for your Venti, so if you don't get any ER on your perfectly rolled crit artifact, your Venti is only sitting at 132% ER, and that's just not enough. You need to have at least 3 energy recharge into your perfectly rolled artifacts to reach at least 150% ER. Next, very importantly, I need to talk about the Swirl Caveats. The caveats are the same before and after the buff. When you face enemies with innate elements such as Cryo Slimes or the Hydro Mimics, the Swirl isn't going to do anything. 70% of the bulk of your damage comes from Swirl, so for example, if you are meant to do 136k damage, you only do 37k instead. Also, if you accidentally infuse Hydro and Venti's ultimate, you will also end up with half the amount of swirls as other elements. So do pay attention to this kind of situation. If you do need your Venti to deal more damage, then you have to use your crit build on such situations. Otherwise, maybe just face the fact that this isn't a situation where Venti is at his strongest to begin with. So this is where I do the TLDR of crit versus EM. With crit in general, you're doing about 20% less damage. With Bennett, it is possible that you do similar damage against inferior EM artifacts, 4-star instead of 5-star for example. So for people who are running Venti with Bennett, unless you change your artifacts to 5-star EM, you won't see any significant changes to your Venti's damage. The other thing about crit build is you are able to do a better damage against enemies with innate elements, as I have previously mentioned. Now EM build, I believe, is significantly easier to build considering that substats matter less and that 4-star artifacts are not far behind from 5-star artifacts. When you convert your Venti from crit build to EM build, it's often you get close to 20% extra DPS. But also only when your Venti is at level 90, because the level factor is a big deal for EM build. Next, another common question, should I level my Venti to level 90? The DPS gain from level 80 to 90 for crit build ranges from around 6 to 15%. The DPS gain from level 80 to 90 for EM build ranges from 20 to 23%. I will say that if you are on the EM build, it is now a priority to get to level 90. So lastly, what do I have to do with my Venti? Here is my take. Number 1, nothing. If you don't need him to perform any better than now, to be honest, I mean, presumably some of you have been getting 3-star on Spiral Abyss anyway, right? In that sense, don't you already reach the damage threshold to clear the game's hardest content? Number 2, swap to Stringless at any Refine or Windbloom Ode Refine 5. This is the safest improvement for most people, even if it screws your crit ratio. Number 3, slowly swap his pieces to EM pieces if you have the artifacts. Priority is Circlet, Sense, and then Cop. Number 4, if you are farming the domain for future or current Anemo units, save the EM artifacts and raise them for Venti to use. Personally, I'm not discarding my crit gear because there are times when it is more useful. And lastly, level your Venti to level 90. That's all from me. I've been BlazeScribe. Please leave a like if you find the video useful and do subscribe for more Genshin Impact contents. Do take note that improvements to Swirl has been incredibly beneficial for both Venti and Sucrose, but not as much for Xiao. Have a great one, guys. Bye bye.